Hello. This episode is about advertisements, be them from corporations or algorithms. This podcast is neither funded by a corporation nor favored by the algorithm, so if you like what you hear today, you can help us out by sharing the episode and supporting us on Patreon. More on that at the end of the show. About a year ago, I was browsing Facebook and I saw a targeted ad that really caught my attention. The ad was for Pepper, a company who makes bras for people with small chests. It featured a curly-haired femme talking about how, as a trans woman with small boobs, she always had trouble finding a bra that fits her, until she found Pepper. When I saw this ad in my newsfeed, my first thought was, yeah, but hey. And my second thought was, wow, I've never seen a trans person in an ad before, like ever, so that's pretty cool. And my third thought was, oh my god, does Facebook know that I'm trans? It was kind of surreal to see an ad with someone like me in it. On one hand, that's never happened before, and I can't knock representation. But on the other hand, why does a corporation have that information about me? I never told Facebook my tea. I did not check off a box at account creation that says, I am trans, please sell me things. I see content like this because an algorithm figured that out about me, and because Facebook sold that information about me to advertisers. And it's not just me. All of us have digital paper trails littering our respective existences. Our data is constantly being collected, sold, and shared by companies who are dying to get your attention in an increasingly crowded marketplace. I'm kind of obsessed with this idea of a digital specter, an algorithmically generated you that follows you around wherever you go, both online and in the real world. More and more people have been picking up on this phenomenon and all the potential harm that it could cause. Recently, there was this op-ed titled, I Called Off My Wedding, The Internet Will Never Forget, on Wired, and I found it really fascinating. Basically, a woman was dating someone for 8 years and started to plan their wedding together, which in the 21st century involves making a Pinterest board, looking up venues, liking pages on Facebook, getting all your friends involved in planning, etc., etc. Until one day, the couple broke up. This was obviously very painful for her. All breakups are, but in this case, her social media feed was still plagued by her wedding content. No matter how much she unfollowed or blocked, she kept getting ads for venues, dresses, gifts, floral arrangements, and more. She couldn't avoid this painful memory of her ex-fiancé and the years she spent with someone who it didn't work out with. It doesn't help that people who buy wedding-related things are usually spending a lot of money on them, so social media sites that monetize based on ads are very hungry for those clicks once they figure out that this is the kind of content that you want. I think about this kind of thing a lot, but especially this month, Pride Month, when so much attention and discourse is paid to how companies love to advertise their products at queer people and trans people. First of all, as a trans person who started her journey just a couple of years ago, I have concerns about having a digital paper trail. Any trans person will tell you about the paper trail you leave behind, especially when you transition during adulthood. Your credit history, birth certificate, and other government documents, old accounts. I have a folder in my closet of all the pre-transition government documents I have in case I need them for whatever crazy reason. But at least with all of those, I can throw them in the closet and forget about them. My digital paper trail is much worse. I actually started all new social media accounts when I transitioned just to avoid this problem, but things still slip through the cracks, and I still get dead named in my email a lot, surprisingly. And that's not even the scariest part about being trans in the digital age. Hate speech and harassment, being reported and kicked off certain platforms for being trans, and other extreme forms of digital harm are totally allowed on platforms like Twitter and YouTube. And yet, every June, I see huge corporations make a rainbow version of their logo and throw it up on social media. I see them sponsor pride parades and put out rainbow-covered products, sometimes while actively harming the LGBTQ community behind the scenes. Tech companies specifically fascinate me when they do this. Sites like Facebook and YouTube adorn rainbow logos while having this entire mechanism to track and harm queer people that they refuse to change. Today, I want to ask, what's the connection between corporate pride and this new digital mechanism of marketing products? How does the sharing of private data with advertisers affect the queer community? And how can we resist corporate pride, both at physical parades and in our social media feeds? To help answer this question, I'm enlisting the help of a fellow PhD student, Yim Register.
At UW right now, I'll try my elevator pitch, which is I study how to bring machine learning literacy back to communities who are trying to advocate for themselves around algorithmic harm.
Yim is a PhD student and NSF GRFP fellow at the University of Washington iSchool. They study machine learning as well as digital self-advocacy and empowerment for marginalized communities. With their expertise in machine learning, perhaps we can figure out the best way to think about this new kind of corporate pride. My name is Anna Marie. Welcome to the Rule 63 podcast.
Content notices for this episode include light discussions of homophobia, transphobia, eating disorders, ableism, and police brutality.
Before we get to the machine learning stuff, I need to say my piece about pride and corporate pride in general. I actually got this new book called The Queen's English, which is an LGBTQIA+ English dictionary written by Chloe Davis, a Black bisexual woman. Here we go. In this amazing dictionary and resource, which uplifts and honors much of the popular terms created by queer people of color over the years, defines pride as confidence in one's identity as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, non-binary, or otherwise non-heteronormative person. Also, a movement that promotes equal rights and social justice for all members of the LGBTQIA+ community. The feeling of pride and the pride movement are related, but slightly different than pride parades, which often take place in June, which is Pride Month. We celebrate Pride in June to honor the rich history of the modern LGBTQIA+ rights movement, which, to save oxygen, I'll be calling the Pride movement or just Pride. As it is said, the first Pride was a riot ignited by the brawl between trans women of color and police officers at the Stonewall Inn on June 28th, 1969. Listen to our prior series on lesser-known queer history for more info on the events leading up to this, but basically, queer and trans people didn't have a place in popular culture up until that point in U.S. history. This first riot was a tipping point for the larger queer and trans community. It set off a cascade of events that resulted in queer and trans people moving from being freaks at the fringes of society to normal, everyday members of society, which we're still kind of working on, but that's a whole other convo. The next year, in June of 1970, the first Pride protest took place, setting an annual tradition of resistance for members of the queer and trans community. The Pride movement then can be understood as a series of gradual gains in wider LGBT acceptance into mainstream society. As more people come out as non-cis, non-heterosexual, non-allosexual identities, these identities start to become normalized and more well understood by the public. Take gay marriage, for instance. Gay marriage wasn't legal in 1969 because the queer community lacked the social and political capital to advocate for themselves at state and national levels. But over the decades of movement building, grassroots activism, and support from straight allies, gay people were able to challenge the legal system and win. This is one framework that we can use to understand corporate pride. Corporate pride is, well, it's a lot of different things, but the short version is that as pride celebrations and pride marches, pride parades become larger and larger with bigger and bigger sponsors, the original message of pride as a protest, as a riot, becomes diluted by advertisements and the giving away of rainbow-colored merch. You may have also heard the term pinkwashing to describe how the more radical parts of queer history, like the Stonewall riots, are stripped away in favor of a nicer, less challenging narrative of liberation, like gay marriage just happened because we all figured out as a society that it was the right thing to do, and not years of grassroots activism and sometimes violent protests. When talking about the earliest examples of gay people in Western advertisements, most point to a 1994 IKEA commercial featuring a gay male couple talking about how much they love their IKEA furniture.
Well, we went to IKEA because we thought it was time for a serious dining room table, and
We have slightly different tastes. I mean, Steve's more into country. It frightens me, but at the same time, I have compassion.
Sorry for the quality of that. That was ripped from YouTube. The result of this was twofold. On one hand, there was public backlash from conservative groups like the American Family Association, who, in response to the ad, called in a fake bomb threat to an IKEA store. On the other hand, IKEA got a lot of free press and raked in money from the gay community. Later in the 1990s, Subaru started an ad campaign featuring lesbian couples with taglines like, "My partner and I love our Subaru." They too got backlash at the time, but it was a really successful campaign that even now, 20 years later, the Subaru Outback is still commonly referred to as the lesbian car, even within queer circles. When a company chooses to, say, make an advertisement featuring a lesbian couple, they know that a few things are going to happen. A, lesbians and lesbian allies will see that ad and think, hey, this is representation. I want to support this company doing this so that we can get more representation like this in the future. And they'll voice their support for it and maybe buy that company's product. And B, homophobes will see that ad and think, this is not in agreement with my values. They will voice disagreement with the ad and possibly stop buying that company's product. The company, being a company, obviously has no material reason to support the lesbian community. Corporations exist to make money, and they made the ad because a spreadsheet told them that the potential benefits from increased sales from Group A outweigh the potential costs of backlash from Group B, not to mention the fact that there is no such thing as bad press, so to speak. When the company then makes that ad, they get applauded by straight people and even queer people for being so brave as to recognize the existence of human beings who exist in the world. But if you couldn't tell from my sarcasm, we here at Rule 63 have a different interpretation. There weren't Subaru ads with lesbians until the 90s for the same reason that there wasn't gay marriage until 2015. If a group is too marginalized, then they don't have the political, social, or economic capital to participate in the mainstream and to be profited off of. But once they get enough of that capital to outweigh the potential public backlash, the banknotes become more important than the bigots. Fast forward to 2015, the year that gay marriage became law of the land in the US, when it was estimated that the LGBT community had a collective spending power of $917 billion with a B dollars. In 2019, Pride parades brought in $50 million to Washington, D.C., $75 million to New York City, and $25 million to Denver, Colorado. What's happened is, as our rights have advanced and we became more visible, LGBT people emerged as a new consumer demographic, a group of people who could be marketed towards and have that be profitable. All that money isn't automatically a bad thing. Some of that money goes back into small businesses and queer-run nonprofits, but we also have to remember that in 2021, Pride is a marketing opportunity. Companies are basically treating it like the Super Bowl, a way to get eyeballs on them and their products. It's a far cry from the critiques of capitalism and police that Pride started as. And that's not even mentioning how this marketing brings money into businesses that are actively harming the queer community, or our allies. Lots of companies put out Pride merch or they sponsor Pride parades while supporting anti-LGBTQ politicians like AT&T, UPS, Comcast, General Electric, FedEx, and Home Depot. Gilead, which overprices their PrEP medication for AIDS treatment, sponsors New York City Pride. And weapons manufacturers like Bay Systems show up at Pride too, despite their weapons being used to kill people. Even the CIA, a government branch responsible for an untold number of atrocities, got in on the game a few months ago when they released an ad campaign saying that if you work for the CIA, they'll respect your pronouns. Yay! At their worst, Pride events can even be exclusive, such as Pride Island, a $3,000 festival featuring musical guests, as well as a Sky vodka sponsorship. Not to mention the existence of cop cars, rainbow cop cars at Pride parades, which should just speak volumes about how the symbols of the queer liberation movement, which started as anti-police riots and protests, remember, have been warped by public perception about the needs of queer people, that being not just gay friendliness and marriage and acceptance, but increasing the minimum wage, addressing homelessness, decriminalization of sex work, access to HIV and AIDS medications, and plenty of other systems of support that can't be done within a police state. So yes, it is a pretty big problem when queer and trans people become a consumer demographic. Note my choice of language here. I've been saying LGBT people when it comes to corporate pride and queer when it comes to liberation. You probably don't see a lot of ads with trans people because the spreadsheets are still coming up negative. We're still such a marginalized group and the backlash against us is so strong. That will one day change, and I want you to be prepared for when that happens, because it's not what we want. We don't want to be a consumer demographic. We want to be liberated. Okay, so any queer worth their salt, and believe me, there is a lot of salt, will be able to tell you about corporate pride. Of course, corporations are going to try to profit off of us. It's what they do, so why talk about it today? Well, like I mentioned at the top of the episode, there's an entirely new mechanism of selling things to queers, or anybody really, that I see as much more sinister. Increasingly, everything you see online is curated specifically for you, usually by machine learning algorithms. Targeted ads on social media are way cheaper than making a float for pride, which I have learned since starting this episode can cost tens of thousands of dollars. With most popular social media sites like Facebook, companies get to select options like send my ad to all women in this area or all LGBT individuals who also like this Facebook page. This is a pretty powerful tool. It also means that corporations may be able to circumvent the potential backlash from featuring queer people in their ads. Take that Pepper ad I saw, for example. How many cis women were even shown the Pepper ad that featured a trans woman? We have no way of knowing. So much for representation, right? This is why I wanted to talk to Yim for this month's episode. It may sound very tinfoil hatty, but I see the new digital landscape as being just as harmful to queer and trans people as the modern, corporatized version of pride, if not more so.
Algorithms are causing harm. People should be able to stand up for themselves and be part of the conversation instead of just tech designers or big companies having the final say, or even just knowing what to ask in the first place.
Yim's whole thing is empowering people to navigate the toxic, algorithmically driven, and advertisement-fueled landscape of social media. We had a great conversation about how these sites really work on the back end and how they prey on certain communities, like the woman who broke up with her fiance, or me and my bras. An important mental shift that we need to make as a society is recognizing that stealing your data is the point of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google, etc. That's their business model. They have to make money somehow, right? And it's a free service. When I say selling your data, I'm talking about the mechanism by which what you do on the internet is tracked and shared with advertisers. That means your Google searches, what you watch on social media, and also what you engage with, aka like, comment, and follow, what your phone learns from text prediction, face recognition, photo tagging, and so much more. If it's on the internet and you're performing an action, it is probably being tracked. If this is news to you, you are not alone. One of Yim's biggest projects has been educating people about machine learning in their daily lives.
I'm working on getting this published where I built something where you could actually look at what Facebook thinks you're interested in. So you can actually download this. They don't make it that easy. You do get like a JSON file, which is like kind of codey, not super friendly, not easy to work with. And it's just a list. So that's interesting on its own. Maybe we can like put the link to this thing that I've built that helps.
Yes, please.
But so you can download your own Facebook data and what they think you care about.
Maybe I'm just a nerd, but I find it very interesting to read what corporations have figured out about me just from my activity. You can look at your own Google data, for example, and see what your ad personalization settings are. Mine include 25 to 34 years old, female, clocked, academic, conferences and publications, audio equipment, beauty and fitness, and pets. But also babies and toddlers, jazz, motorcycles, and pork. It's hit or miss, but the major points are still definitely there.
I had the most random shit. Am I allowed to swear?
Yes.
I had the most random shit. However, I was surprised, like in my Facebook data, there was like self-growth, transgenderism, first of all.
Transgenderism.
But then there was like LGBTQ rights, like LGBT, like it actually was pretty lit.
I definitely have the transgenderism tag on my Facebook profile. It would explain a lot. Certainly the pepper bras, but way more than that as well. Yim sees this as a great educational tool for users.
The point being that by looking at your own data, you can surface the kinds of harms that are being done to you, to know more of what to ask for, to know more of what to talk about, to know more of what to demand and what to look for and what to be aware of.
So what are these harms that we're talking about? If Facebook can show me an ad for something that I need and then I buy it and get use out of it, that sounds like a win for the both of us, right? Well, not exactly. The almighty algorithm doesn't just show you ads you might engage with, it dictates literally everything in your feed.
Part of what Anna was just talking about is the kinds of input that goes into these social media algorithms to give you an output. So what you are seeing is a combination of what you have liked in the past, what you have commented in the past, what the kinds of ads you have clicked on.
That means that what you actually want out of social media, like posts from friends, content from pages that you follow, or events you could be interested in, are dictated by this machine learning algorithm, not just a straightforward chronological list of posts that you might want to see. Meaning that you have less and less control over what you see unless you really put in the work to curate a specific feed, like with the ex-fiancé example.
They are starting to include more things that are like, hide this ad, mute this ad, don't see this again, which part of me really appreciates because it does give the user more control. And it's kind of like us doing Facebook's job for them, of like deepening ourselves into a hole of curated stuff, right?
An even more dangerous iteration of companies getting content to your eyeballs is the people like you feature of most media apps.
So beyond that, it's not just on you. So this is a very important thing that I like to talk about. There is matching of similar people like you. So this is a big one on Netflix or Amazon. People like you, what do they buy? What do they watch? And on social media as well, who are they following?
So if Facebook, for example, clocks you as trans, they will show you content that other trans people are engaging with, even if they're entirely outside of your social network. Or worse, you could be shown things that are incongruent to your evolving sense of identity.
And I asked people to kind of talk about harms that came out of that or could come out of that. One of the things I will mention is people who are closeted. And they actually brought up, they said, I'm in the closet and my social media, the thing that like admittedly we all are sucked into. I don't mind being sucked into it. It's my community. But I'm being fed things that are incongruent with who I am and possibly harmful. And, they might be seeing a lot of Christian stuff. They might be seeing a lot of Trump stuff at the time.
This is all designed to make you continue engaging with new content so that you keep scrolling forever. But besides being an infinite hole in which you put your time and attention into for nothing in return, there are other consequences of the system, and this is where we get into the anti-queer territory. Algorithmically driven content based on your stolen data has a unique impact on queer and trans people, who may need to hide their identities to resist harassment, unemployment, or homelessness. What do you do when the internet clocks you as queer before your employer or family do? Another example of algorithms that cause harm that I like to bring up is on dating apps like Tinder. If you didn't know, Tinder has more than 50 gender options for you to put on your dating profile, which is pretty progressive. But importantly, Tinder's matching algorithms, aka the machine learning process that determines which profiles you get shown and who gets shown your profile, still only uses 2 genders, male or female. The 50 gender options are purely cosmetic and only for other users to see. That means that if the app categorizes you as female for whatever reason, whether because your Facebook account that you set it up with has you as female on its backend, it doesn't matter what you put on your profile, whether you're non-binary or a trans guy, it will still show your profile to male users seeking women, even if that's not what you want. Tinder is also famous for banning trans people from the app entirely. If you're trans and someone reports you as being not who you say you are, quote unquote, Tinder may kick you off the app for weeks, and possibly forever if you can't appeal the ban, because a lot of these reporting systems are mainly driven by algorithms with very little human input.
So flagging hate speech, taking things down, downweighting them in the algorithm, banning accounts, suspending accounts. A lot of that is algorithmically done with human input. So if you flag something, maybe that goes to an algorithm that is taking that as input. You're saying, okay, this is bad. I don't like how someone said this. And that goes into this algorithm that they've maybe already trained, built to look for certain types of things.
Meanwhile, Tinder gets celebrated sometimes for their public-facing woke gender options, which again only matter on the surface and not within the algorithm. It's the perfect analogy for digital corporate pride. Managing harassment on your platform is a big problem with no easy solutions. It's difficult to strike a balance between human and algorithm and how those algorithms should be trained.
I'll give an example, which is the other day I was joking and I referred to myself as one of the transes. And I got a little pop-up that was like, this seems harmful. Are you sure you want to post? And I thought about it. At first I was like, whoa, like, oh my God, what? I did think about it. Would I really want to be called one of the transes by someone who hates us?
Yeah.
No, but also like, I should not be getting flagged for that kind of speech.
This isn't even necessarily a limit of our current technological capabilities. Sometimes it's a limit of context and human language.
Even when I'm usually teaching people a little bit about like natural language processing, so that's any kind of machine learning that's using language, I think about how would you tag the word queer as a reclaimed word if someone is calling you a queer versus you are claiming the word queer. This is hard for a machine, not impossible with the right kind of training, the right kind of understanding, if we want that. That's another thing. It's like, do we want all of these automatic removal of speech? Sometimes. I have a video that talks into, how hate speech gets flagged by an algorithm, but also like, I don't want to live in a world where all of my digital stuff is policed.
Is cleansed for you.
And I don't want to live in a world where every other comment is cruel.
And even when systems are in place for flagging content, much like with Tinder, users can abuse these systems to push people from certain groups even further into the margins, which just so happens to be related to another one of Yim's projects.
So fat bodies will just get flagged more and taken down and down-weighted in the algorithm. So that even just means they're not as popular. They won't show up as much to the general populace, even if you are following this person.
Yeah.
And they'll get banned. They can get their accounts taken down simply for existing. And it's not even just about, well, if they were breaking the rules, like, oh, well, they were nude. How many skinny, nude, hot ladies have you seen on the internet, right? Like, it's not about following the rules. It's about being differentially banned and targeted.
All these forms of algorithmic bias hit queer and trans folks hard, to the point where it's a modern sign of privilege to have never had to think about self-moderating your own social media feeds. Social media companies work really hard to get your attention, and they're really good at it too. It's especially hard to resist the algorithm if you're part of a big consumer demographic, such as a person shopping for a wedding or a queer person in the month of June. Yim gave a really good example from their own life when we were talking about the people like you functionality of social media. Content notice for eating disorders for this part, by the way.
And I will say, I mostly climbed out of an eating disorder from this feature. So I had a pretty bad eating disorder. Many trans people do,
Yeah, we sure do.
And I have really come into myself in like the anti-diet eating disorder recovery world.
The weight loss industry is a $71 billion industry, meaning those who are selling specialized diets, recipes, or exercises, are eager for your eyeballs. It also means that if you want to avoid this kind of content for whatever reason, you need to try really hard to unfollow, block, and mute the accounts and people and ads that discuss it.
It could have gone the other way, right? So this is a big danger, is that there are just so much fitspo and diet and bodies and restriction and all of that stuff that you could go down a rabbit hole. I also had real human live friends that were in recovery with me. I also had therapy. I also had all of these other resources. But now curating my feeds and content that I consume is all anti-diet. I see something that has the word cleanse in it and I unfollow like immediately. I haven't even seen that in a while.
Social media can be a really harmful and triggering space for all sorts of people for all sorts of reasons, and this is just one example. But by knowing how the apps work, people can be empowered to engage with social media in a safe way.
But I have used this kind of idea that if I get put into this very profitable bucket, which is weight loss and dieting and wellness, that I will get sucked into that. And it is sort of my responsibility, at least for or within my own control. If it is the company's responsibility, they're not doing anything to help me. So it is my own chance to make sure that I don't get put in that bucket.
So, solution time. What can be done about all of this? What changes to social media should we be advocating for?
Should it be all on the user? No. These companies have a great responsibility to listen, to change, to control their algorithms, to be transparent about their algorithms, and more. The only problem with some of my work where I'm like, you should self-advocate, say what you need. What if they don't listen? What if they don't listen? I do believe that a large basis of grassroots efforts does bring things into the like public consciousness and puts pressure on companies. I do believe that. I don't know if that's the ultimate dynamic I would want. The ultimate dynamic, to manifest it. The ultimate dynamic that I would want is a company like Facebook being like, I really genuinely care about the billions of people using this that want to feel seen and want to feel heard and want to explore and want to be creative and want to connect. And I want to make it the safest place possible for them to thrive. Manifesting. I don't care how wild that sounds.
I personally love the design justice framework of working with users to dictate their experience with technology. If you're designing technologies, definitely check out Sasha Costanza-Chalk's book on the subject. They're a trans femme who knows a lot about this subject. Yim also says that we need better tools for both creators and users.
Yep. So that's a thing that doesn't exist yet, really, that I would love to see and has been prompted through some of my research. Is what if we had filters that we controlled of this is how many people I want to influence my network. right now. It could even be contextual, right? Like what's going on in the world. You might just be like, I can't listen to this right now. Like I just want to see puppies and trans people. Like, whereas, and then it is a little bit on you, right? If you are filtering your whole world to be very small, maybe it's more explicit. I don't know. But either way, I got some examples of like, what if I could filter who I got recommendations from my feed? So from that Facebook example, right?
Yeah.
What if on a given day I wanted like extra sensitive feed, right? Like just don't show me any swearing today. Don't show me anything sad.
Also, while corporations are still figuring their stuff out, there's a lot that individual people can do in the meantime to improve their experience on social media. The first of which is just, as we've said, educating yourself as to how things work.
Number one is understanding that this is an algorithmically curated environment. That's what you're going to say to your friends and family. I'm living in an algorithmically curated environment.
Another big thing that helped for them was to create rules for themselves based off their understanding of how they could be monetized as a queer person, as an autistic person, etc.
So I have little rules for myself. So for instance, I was talking about the diet culture stuff. Certain words, like I make it systemic. If it's like a certain word shows up, like cleanse or weight loss, I unfollow. I don't need that. So I kind of make little rules for myself that make it easier. One of them that's also like a feeling, I guess, is if I compare myself in any way to what I'm seeing. So that can be body wise. That can be, I recently got into roller skating and I followed a bunch of roller skating accounts. And I started just like judging myself, or even just like content creation. Like, I don't know if you feel this, Anna, but like listening to podcasts, you're like, this isn't my podcast yet. Like I have that with everything I do sometimes, where I'm like, I wish I was this good. Unfollow, even if they're doing something totally benign, like roller skating. Like even it's not their fault. Even if they're doing something great, you can mute. I don't need it.
Yep.
I don't need the energy.
That is why I refuse to listen to podcasts that are better than mine. Another big thing I am always advocating for is to change your algorithm. Diversifying who you follow will not only cause you to learn more and be a better person, but will show the algorithm that that kind of content is worth watching and will recommend it to other people.
A very important thing that you must do, I'm going to say this as you must, you need to follow people that look different than you. The end. That's like, it might be hard at first to find. Search your hashtags, search the things that you like, such as autism content or trans content or political content or whatever, and make sure your whole feed doesn't look like you. You will learn a lot. It is your also responsibility for these algorithms to show that Black people should not just be marketed to Black people. Like you need to demonstrate an interest, which is really fucked up. But you need to demonstrate that also, like, and for trans people, like maybe because I'm into roller skating too, maybe some of like trans and autistic content and anti-diet content will leak into the roller skating cluster, right? So we have a responsibility to show that we are these diverse, nuanced humans.
Another approach you could take is to try to fight the algorithm. Basically, scramble its radar by being totally random in how you engage so that it gets overall worse at guessing content for you.
Alternatively, fuck with the algorithms.
Yeah.
So this is if you're like, no, I don't want to be perceived as like all the nuance that I am. I don't want to be categorized. I don't want to be defined by this. Just go random on that. Like, just go random, like whatever you want, see what happens, do it as an experiment, do it for fun.
But most importantly, remember that challenging this incomprehensibly large system does not fall solely on you.
You have to start with not blaming yourself as well. There is a lot of kind of rhetoric coming from the top that's like, well, you have the power to change your algorithm. So like, it must be you if you're, addicted or have like a crappy experience. These companies and algorithms are designed to keep you scrolling. Remember the invention of infinite scroll?
Mm-hmm.
To get you to buy things, to get you to watch ads.
There are plenty of approaches to engaging with social media, one of which may be getting off social media entirely. No matter what, though, you need to think about social media as a marketing platform, a storefront that is actively trying to make you the product. So you need to put effort into it in order to be a safe, well-informed citizen, and to make it into a tool that serves you, not the corporations.
I have a really good relationship, I guess, with my social media right now. Who knows what will happen next?
Yeah.
So just remember, like, there is no one way that you're going to feel better, just like in life.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one way to tell these companies or tell your friends how to fix the world. There's your way. Here's some tips. Take what works for you.
Hi, thanks so much for listening to this episode all the way through. If you like what you heard, subscribe to us on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, and share it with a few people. It helps us with the almighty algorithm, as we discussed in the episode. If you really liked what you heard, consider becoming a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/rule63. That's patreon.com/rule63, where you can get access to bonus content. For each episode we do, Danny and I do a bonus episode where we talk about that month's topic in more detail, and you'll get access to monthly Q&A live streams where you get to talk directly to us. There's a lot I didn't discuss in this episode, such as algorithmic bias and its impact on people of color, and the two really important cases going on with Apple right now, those being Apple v. Epic and the battle with Facebook over the new iOS update that requires users to opt in to data sharing, both of which have a lot to do with what we discussed today and could have a big impact on how digital marketplaces work. Also up on Patreon right now is the full uncut interview with Yim. The two of us vibed really hard, and they shared their transition story, and we both shared even more of our thoughts about navigating digital spaces and corporate pride. Plus, there were some funny moments. Here's a preview.
Happiest little trans moment of my digital life was when I got an ad to become a sperm donor.
Wow.
And I was like, I've made it.
That's hilarious.
This is the pinnacle.
You've peaked.
Exactly.
Don't forget to connect with Yim on Instagram, where they do really cool art, Twitter, Medium, and YouTube. All of their info is in the show notes, along with the references for today's episode. Also, other corporate pride tips I'm required to tell you is that there are non-corporate police-free pride events happening in cities all across the country, such as the Queer Liberation March in NYC. Find out what's happening in your city and resist corporate pride. And buy from queer creators on Etsy, not Target. Fuck 12, defund the police, protect trans kids, what else? Okay, that's all for now. I will see you all next month for another Rule 63 episode. Bye!